All right, so today in 9.6, we're going to be solving rational equations. We've simplified some, we've added and subtracted, that kind of thing. Today, we're going to be solving. Now, basically, we're going to have sort of two setups. So I want us to first go through, and I call them strategies, and kind of look at two strategies to solve these, and then we'll go through and solve a few. So here's the first strategy. This is if you've just got one fraction on either side of the equal sign, and that's it. Okay, nothing else. If you've just got one fraction on either side of the equal sign, then the easiest thing to do is cross multiply. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'll have 2 times x minus 15 equals 4 times 3x minus 5. And then I'll solve this thing. So 2x minus 30 equals 12x minus 20. I'm going to move the x's over here. And I'll move the numbers to this side. So x equals negative 1. Now, you do want to think about restrictions on these. You don't necessarily have to write them out, but you do want to make sure your answer is not a restriction. So my restrictions would be 15, and this one I'm actually going to write down, so it's equal to 0 and solve. I'd move the 5 over, divide by the 3. So x cannot equal 5 over 3. Now, it's not, neither of these is negative 1, so that's a good answer. So you don't necessarily have to write your restrictions, but you need to think about them. Make sure that you don't have a restriction that's also an answer. Okay, so strategy 1 is if you've just got one fraction on each side of the equal sign, cross multiply. Okay, your second strategy is if you have more than just one thing on each side of the equal sign. So here you'll see you've got like two terms. You can't do strategy 1, you can't cross multiply. So strategy 2, I'm going to go ahead and kind of write it out, and then you'll see what I mean here in a second, is to clear out the fractions. And then you should have something left that you can solve. So then solve. All right, now here's how I'm going to clear out my fractions. I want to look at all of my fractions, here I have 3 of them, however many you have, and decide on the lowest common denominator. In my case, it's 10x. I need 10 for the 2's and the 5's. I need an x because I've got an x in these. So my lowest common denominator is 10x. Now what I'm going to do with this 10x is in 9.5, we multiplied top and bottom. My other option is to multiply all the way across just in the top. Now, I can only do that if I've got an equal sign. So I didn't have that option in 9.5 when I had an expression. I didn't have an equation. Here I've got an extra option. So I'm going to multiply by my least common denominator all the way across. What that's going to allow me to do is reduce. So here 2 goes into 10 5 times. The x's are going to cancel. 5 goes into 10 2 times. Again, the x's are going to cancel. And 2 goes into 10 5 times. I've still got the x. So here's what I've got left. In this first term, I just have the 5. The second term, I've got the 2 times the 2 is 4. And in this last term, I've got 1 times 5 is 5 and the x. This is what I've got left. I'm just going to solve. Okay, I can do that. So x is 1/5. Now again, think about restrictions from your original problem. 0 is what would be a problem. It's not my answer, so that's fine. All right, so these are our two strategies, the two things that we're going to go through and do. So on each of these, I'm going to kind of ask you, well, I can't really ask you because you're not here, but I'm going to kind of mention, okay, I'm using strategy 1, I'm going to use strategy 2. All right, so this one, I cannot use strategy 1 because I've got 2 fractions here, so I can't cross multiply. So instead, I'm going to clear out my fraction. So I'm going to decide on my lowest common denominator, which in my case is going to be x plus 1. And then I'm going to multiply by that all the way across. Just in the top, I've got to write teeny tiny here. Okay, now I want to write out what I've got here just because it's kind of tiny. I think you may have a hard time seeing it if I don't. You can do this without writing out this extra step right here. I think you're fine to do it from there when you're doing it on your own. Okay, so here's what I want you to see is going to happen. My x's are going to cancel. Here my x plus 1's are going to cancel. And it's going to leave me with 4x plus 1 minus 3x equals x plus 1. Now, this is bigger than the last one we had, but this is something I know how to solve. So you should end up with something you know how to solve. So let's finish this off. I'm going to distribute and distribute. Ooh, it's a quadratic, which means I'm going to factor quadratic formula. Combine like terms, so 4x and a negative 3x is 1x. All right, now quadratic means get everything on one side of the equal sign, and then I'll try to factor. If I can factor, I'll use quadratic formula. So I'm going to move the 4 over, move the x over. I personally like to keep my x squared positive. That's why I moved everything over here where the x squared is. All right, my x's cancel, and I'll have minus 4 here. Now I'm just going to bring this right up here. So I'll have 0 equals x squared minus 4. And I can factor that, difference of perfect squares. So minus 2 plus 2. Set those equal to 0 and solve, and I'll get 2 and negative 2. Now, those are not my restrictions. If I go back up here to the top, my restrictions would be 0 and negative 1. These are not restrictions, so they are good answers. All right, so here's our next one. Now I want you to notice this one just has one fraction on either side of the equal sign, so I should be fine to cross multiply. So I'm going to cross multiply here. Let me write out what I have. And cross multiply here. So I'll have 5x squared minus 5 equals 30x minus 30. Now again, it's a quadratic, so I'm going to get everything on the same side of the equal sign. I guess I'll put this back here for the moment so that I can quadratic formula or factor. All right, so I'm going to put my x squared first. So 5x squared minus 30x plus 25, negative 5 plus 30. This is what I need to go through and factor. I think I can pull out a 5, so I'm going to start by doing that. And then I'll factor this thing. All right, so let's see. Minus 5 minus 1, which means my answers are 5 and 1. Now, before I'm finished, I need to check my restrictions. So I need to set each of these equal to 0, each of the denominators equal to 0, and solve. I'm going to actually write these down versus doing it in my head because I think I'm going to have more of them. So I'm going to move the 2 over, divide by 2. So x equals 1 is a restriction. Okay, I got to throw that one out because 1 is an answer, but it's also a value x cannot equal. So I've got to get rid of it. It's called an extraneous solution. I've got to check those restrictions for them. And over here with the x squared minus 1, I would have 1 and negative 1. Now 1 I already threw out. Negative 1's not one of my answers. So 5 should be good as an answer. All right, so these are pretty tough. You've got a lot of the solving that you've got to do from last semester, plus you've got to do all of the cross multiplying or getting rid of the fraction. So you've got a lot of steps here. Okay, one more before we're going to look at a last little thing. I want you to notice one fraction on either side of the equal sign. So I should be fine to cross multiply. So I'm going to go this direction first. I'll have negative 4x plus 2. And going the other direction, I'll have 15x plus 2. And then I'll go through and distribute out. And finish up solving. So I'm going to just move my x's over here. Now this time it's not a quadratic. So I don't need to get everything on one side of the equal sign because I'm not going to be factoring. Okay, divide by my 19. So x equals negative 2. All right, now that's great, but I need to recheck my restriction. So here the 5 isn't a problem because there's not an x, but negative 2 is going to be a restriction. Got to cancel it out. Here, negative 2 is also a restriction. I already got rid of it. Now you'll notice I don't have any answer here. So my answer is no solution. But I wouldn't know that until I go through all of my work. So make sure you go back and check those. I think it's fairly likely I'll give you one on a test with an extraneous solution. I've told you all this on other tests. I want to know if you're looking for it. And I don't know if you're looking for it if I don't give you one where you have to. So expect that on a test. I probably will give you one with an extraneous solution. So look for it. Okay, last thing that we are going to do here is, again, we're solving, but this time there's more than one variable in the mix. And I want us to solve for the t. Now I can pretty much do the same thing. There's one fraction on either side of the equal sign, so I'm going to cross multiply. So here, I'm going to put the 4 first. I'll have 4L pi squared. Maybe I should put that in a different order. I'm going to change my order here. I'm still doing this right here, but I'll have 4 pi squared L. And then going the other direction, I'll have g t squared. Now I'm supposed to solve this for t. So here's my t. It's actually squared at the moment. So I'm going to get that t by itself, or at least as close as I can. So I'm going to get rid of my g by dividing by it. And I'll have t squared equals 4 pi squared L over g. And then I'm going to get rid of my squared by taking the square root. Now, when I do that, I do probably want to remember a plus or minus. Your book's sometimes not always good about doing that, but you will want to remember that. I forgot my squared. Now, I just want you to notice that regardless of being able to solve the whole thing, you can still solve for a variable. You may just have messy values still in your problem. This is a tough section, so you want to make sure that you are working at this. You're coming to see me if you have questions, but get some good work done because it's pretty tough. You've really got to practice this a lot. If you need to go back and watch the podcast again, do that, but you really need to have some dedicated work on this section.